Welcome, adventurers, to the podcast that goes through everything gaming, with your hosts Benji and Donchap. Wherever you're listening in, get ready to shuffle those cards, roll the dice, and count your victory points, because this is Play Up and Chat.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Play Up and Chat. This is our third episode that you're listening to, and you're here with me, Don Chap.
And me, Benji.
And for today's episode, we're going to be covering the different styles of GMing or dungeon mastering.
But before we jump into our wonderful topic of today, we'd like to say that if you enjoy listening to our content, you can follow our Facebook page, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok to keep up to date on everything that we post.
And last but not least, we also have Patreon. Patreon is your direct way of supporting us for as little as €3 per month. And you can find us on patreon.com/playupmt.
And for our lucky pick for this week, we'd like to mention a shout out to our first Patreon is Jake
Greg.
Breck.
Thank you, Jake, for supporting us. You rock, mate.
Thanks, buddy.
So heading straight into our episode here, different styles of GMing. Ben, would you like to introduce our first subject?
Oh, yes, definitely. So, everybody knows, with role playing games, tabletop role playing games like Dungeons and Dragons and others, there are different kinds of game master styles and dungeon master styles. And the first on our list today, after doing a lot of research, we've come up with the Obsessive Planner. So, this is the DM that is always prepared.
So this is a DM that has everything set up, from rule books to miniatures to playmats, everything down to the little bitty gritty detail you can imagine.
Definitely, this is the kind of DM that's going to come to the table with this huge, massive binder of all the campaign notes, all the plans, any contingency plans, and contingency plans to the contingency plans that they expect. Their preparation is on point.
The only thing that they're not prepared for is that monkey wrench that the players throw in the middle of their campaign.
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes I think no DMs can really prepare for that. No matter how many contingency plans you put in place, sometimes players just go wild with their creativeness.
Unfortunately, sometimes this guy comes up with all the plans, and you might catch him flat footed if he's not prepared for what you're about to throw. He might even be that dungeon master that gives you a bit of a no from time to time.
Sometimes, yes.
The second style of dungeon mastering, and this is my personal favorite, is the storyteller.
Definitely, the storyteller loves a good story and is not going to compromise anything for the narrative. The narrative is key, the narrative is focus, and as long as the narrative drives the game forward, the storyteller DM is going to be happy.
Sometimes this guy ends up going as far as excluding combat from time to time. It's all about the narrative, as Benji just said. Basically, it's about your backstory, how it evolves in the current arching story, and describing multiple situations in exclusive details and expecting the players to role play accordingly.
Sometimes I do feel that the storyteller, the combat, as you hinted at, falls to the background a lot, because of the way that role playing is put forward and narrative is given the importance. So maybe sometimes that is a little bit not as focused as the story, but overall, anyone who really enjoys a good story and loves the role playing element is going to have a good time with this DM.
And sometimes it makes the players wonder from time to time, like, why do I even have a weapon? It depends.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It really depends on how the dungeon master actually portrays the storytelling of it all, because there are some funny moments. I've had some in my sessions.
Yeah, I've definitely had some really good times with some storyteller DMs. But I do like the mechanics of the combat, and sometimes when it's too story focused, I miss the combat personally.
And then up next, we have the coordinator. So this is the darker side of the storyteller, so to speak.
Yeah, this DM and these DMs do have a story to tell, but they'll be damned if they left everything up to player choice. Let player choice get in the way of it, because these guys Um, they're more like it's a DM story rather than all the player story, and they're going to be focused on delivering that big DM story rather than letting some player choices influence the outcome of the story.
Yeah, so basically, what we're looking at here in relation to the conductor is basically he's going to be narrating, for the most part. His story barely includes anything about the backstory of the characters, if they even have one to go with. Something that's very important to introduce to your players prior to the game that this is the type of dungeon master you are, because you might have a good story to say, but you pretty much are telling them, listen, you may as well read a novel because this is going to go my way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you really want the story to go the way you want to go, then just write it as a book, if because the different choices that the players are going to make are going to influence the story in such a way that the DM is never going to have planned for. And it calls for such a better story than if it has to be by the book, by the way the DM wants it to go, it's different.
And this brings us up to the next type of game master, which some people confuse the two. This is the puppet master. The puppet master here is basically very similar to the conductor. The only difference is he's also going to describe what the players are doing. So he's literally micromanaging everything.
Yeah, so imagine like the conductor is there with his own story, but when the players come to reenact those, let's say, awesome moments, the Puppet Master DM has got every little string. He's going to describe how you swing that axe. He's going to describe how you lost footing on that dex ability check on athletics. He's going to describe every tiny little detail down to the tiny little bit of storytelling that it should be down sometimes to the player, but no, he's in control.
Exactly. And you do have that situation where the PCs end up having too much of a backseat, unfortunately, when it comes to this type of dungeon mastering style.
Yeah. Moving on to the next one, which I think we might see a few of, going to different campaigns here and there, is the by the book guy. So this DM knows the rules front and back like the back of his hand, but he is super traditional with how he plays his games. So everything is all about following the rules to the T, to the full stop, to the comma, to the dashed T. Everything is like that.
There's actually no wiggle room for homebrewing in this type of dungeon mastering style, unfortunately. So it's basically, is it in the rule book? Is it in the player's handbook? Is it in the dungeon master's book? Is it in the monster manual book? No? Then no. You cannot have that. That cannot be done. Definitely no, no, no.
Yeah, there's absolutely no room for interpretations, which is kind of sad because a lot of the fun sometimes in games like D&D come from the interpretations of the way different things works, and it allows for those cool moments, like sure there's a bit of wiggle room, or maybe there's a homebrew item that really adds depth to your character. Ultimately it boils down to everyone wanting to have fun at the table, and if that's not really happening, then why follow the rules right down to the rules?
Exactly. And sometimes you're going to find this type of dungeon mastering style crossover a tiny bit with the next type of DMing style, the dungeon crawler.
Oh yes, the dungeon crawler looks at the table as a war game. So imagine D&D but with Warhammer figurines on there, and it's a war game.
So basically, this guy's going to build a map. He's going to actually build a dungeon from scratch, if not follow a dungeon that is already pre printed. And you just have to basically just go through the dungeon, open the door, bust open the door, find a way to avoid the traps. Okay, you have a monster. Okay, everyone roll, move. If you guys really wanted that type of game, you should have gone for a war style game. Full stop. Not the D&D.
Yeah, definitely. A tabletop war playing game is going to be something more up your alley if that's what you're after.
All right, so when it comes to this type of dungeon mastering style, you're gonna have one problem. Your character sheet, backstory in specific, is gonna mean nothing for this dungeon master. It's pretty much a dungeon crawler on the on the table, and if you even had a backstory to begin with, it's not gonna be there. Role playing is gonna be down to a minimum. So people that play specific classes are gonna suffer when you're going to play against this type of dungeon master. Classes like, I don't know, Ben, you help me out.
Yeah, Yeah, definitely. So I play these kind of classes. For example, bards. You know, they're very like social manipulation. They're very charismatic, full of charisma. Maybe not too good at combat. You know, they're a master of all trades. Sorry, they're a jack of all trades, but master of none. You know, so there's not really too much combat to be going there. You got also maybe rogues or warlocks where they're trying to be a bit more sneaky, you know, with their stealth attacks, or warlocks with a bit more trying to talk with the people. Anything that's like a bit more role playing y sort of, and maybe a bit of high charisma characters are going to suffer here a bit. Although something that is cool, if you're into it, of course, and you really want to make the most of your campaign or session with a DM that is a dungeon crawler, maybe try min maxing a character. You know, and really diving deep into those mechanics of combat. That might help actually make a session more fun.
Yeah, or else be that kind of character that actually ends up metagaming the whole situation by creating a certain, mix of classes that basically make it impossible for you to ever lose in such a scenario.
Well, I mean, yeah, if it's focused always on combat, then create a character that is definitely going to go into every combat and come out a winner, right? If it's so heavy combat focused.
So we've mentioned six types of dungeon mastering styles, which we find that are can either be very similar to each other or be very specifically, strict to being that type of dungeon master to begin with. However, the next couple of titles, we're gonna find that you're gonna find more appropriate in a situation, life to life, in real life situation. And first and foremost, I think we've all been here, the dungeon master, which we all know as the noob.
Yeah, everybody's been there. We want to start a game of D&D. We don't have a dungeon master. So what are we going to do? We're going to pull out our handbooks, we're going to learn the rules, and we're going to try to DM ourselves. You know, it's cool. The DMs always have to start from somewhere, and sure, we can stumble a bit, but it's practice, you know. We're new at it.
Yeah, so don't be ashamed for being this type of dungeon master, especially if you're starting off. You might be considered like not exactly the best dungeon master that there is, but the fact that you've been courageous enough to take the role and start a story for your players, I think is the first step in the right direction. Even if you do stumble on your words, even if you don't remember what your PC's backstory was, or you mix up names or as you go, perhaps even forget the abilities that certain characters have. It's all well and good. This is where everyone starts from. I've been there, and a lot of other dungeon masters have been here.
Definitely, I've been there as well. And you know, a word of advice to all those of you listeners who want to get into DMing, you know, it's fine to keep notes even if people say that you refer to your notes a little too often, you know, notes are always good to have. It's always good to keep moving on forward. And it's great to get feedback from your players as well because it's just practice, practice, practice. The more you do it, the better you become at it.
Yeah, just keep practicing at it, and at some point, you will find your dungeon mastering style. You will find yourself getting to know the rules a bit better and how the game is played. The most important thing is everyone's having fun at this point. Just remember, whenever you're going to take the role of a
Yeah.
dungeon master, the one essential thing that everyone will tell you is it's a lot of homework to begin with. So make sure you want to take that role, and once you take that seat, it's going to be hard kind of to get off it and play as a player from time to time. At least in my experience, that's what happened to me.
Yeah, no, that's true. Once people see you as the DM, then it's you know, I don't like to say it, but it is almost like a curse, you know, the DM curse. You're stuck with being a DM. But look, you know, as long as everybody's having fun, you can get into a community, you can find new DMs, you can play with them. The best thing to do, as we've mentioned, is, you know, just practice, get feedback, and maybe if you practice enough and you keep DMing and DMing because, you know, you can't be a player, maybe, just maybe someday you might reach the title of the best DM to ever live.
And that brings us to our next title for a dungeon mastering style. I think Ben can take more of this topic than I can because apparently I'm under this title according to him. I don't want to take that kind of credit, to be honest, because I do have my flaws.
Yeah, no, every DM does have their flaws, but to be honest, I started off the Dungeons and Dragons with you, my dude, and Oh my! I remember our first campaign, and it was, mwah, it was just amazing. I love that, you know. And so to sort of give the listeners a little insight, like this title, the best DM to ever live, you know, they get everything right. They got engaging plot points. They've got they put their player characters' backstory into the real drive of the narrative. You know, they do NPC voices and all of that stuff. They're always prepared with their books. Like they have a little bit of almost every other DM style that we put in before, but they manage everything and take little pieces and bits and pieces of them and mesh them all together, allowing for wiggle room to really bring the game to life.
Yeah, I mean, as a dungeon master myself, I love to do this. Put it, it's very important for character interaction, role playing, getting to know the basic rules as well is very important. And I guess for me, this is why, desperately, as I really need a dungeon master screen more than anything. Um, I've in the past I've used my laptop as a dungeon master screen. I've built my own master screen, and actually, I'm so happy that you guys actually got me a Dungeon Master screen for my birthday. It was so needed. It makes
Yeah,
things so
you're
much easier
welcome.
for me to get
Definitely.
you
Yeah.
guys involved more into my sessions because I can actually hang in notes there, have quick references to the rules. So this way, we won't forget any crucial,
Yeah,
important,
seriously.
factors that are important in the game and the storytelling and all that. It's not the first time that I kind of wing a moment off because you guys throw a monkey wrench into my plans, and I go like, okay, we gotta create a new NPC. I mean, rat, the rat dude, right? Which I'm not gonna say on air because sometimes it's misinterpreted. No,
Rat scum.
okay,
OMG.
you said it.
Why? We can't say his name.
It's
We can't say
sometimes
his name. Okay, you can bleep it out. Bleep it
sometimes it's
out.
mispronounced or misinterpreted. Anyways, that guy was actually done on the spot, and that guy stuck. But there are other NPC names which I had changed, and everyone's like, "Wasn't that guy his name?" This guy's like, "Look, listen." Like, I'm glad someone took note of that because I can't come on the spot with that.
Yeah, it's something that never ceases to amaze me is that you're always ready on the fly with some solution either to a problem or a mistake or something, and it's seamlessly ties into the narrative and the story, which is like, whoa, was that really intended to be like that? Was that NPC really that awesome? You know, it's just it's so cool to immerse yourself in a game where your DM is on the fly, you know, coming up with things that really make the game so
The whole
much
point of
better.
it is you make mistakes, players makes mistakes, and on the fly, as quick as possible, you recover from them and make it seamless as possible. Of course, over here, Ben gives me the credit, to be honest, but truly, we have other mentions. I can think of Matt Mercer. Um,
Oh yeah, like if there is, I think one DM that any DM might aspire to be, it's a DM like Matt Mercer.
yeah, you have Jerry
Honestly, like
Hawkins, Chris Perkins. I mean, these are well-renowned dungeon masters who these are the best DMs to ever live, to be honest, in my opinion, and they're quite renowned for that.
definitely. And moving on to maybe a DM who thinks he's the best, but might not be the best, but you know,
These, yeah, these are the
thinks
yeah, exactly.
he is
These are the
God.
dungeon masters who think that they are god. So, and there's a problem with these type of dungeon masters because the ones that think that they are god means that they over obsessively use the rule zero. Now, what is the rule zero? Basically, rule zero means that it is at the dungeon master's discretion to say yay or nay for a situation, and more often than not, because of the plans, because of how they designed their one shot, their session, they tend to use no more often than not. I kind of mentioned this in a bit in one of the earlier topics, but this is the guy that excessively uses no for situations. I actually played in someone's session who used this too much. And he literally was micromanaging the situation to his advantage as a dungeon master, where my character died out of narration more than combat because the DM wanted it to go that way.
Yeah, it's not really that much fun to play with god type DM, almost because it kind of takes the fun out of it. The DMs must respect the players as much as the players must respect the DM, I think. And as long as everybody at the table understands this and plays to have fun, I think that is the basis for a better game.
Moving on to the next type of dungeon master, we have the old school guy.
Oh, the old school guy. These guys, they see D&D as what it
I
was
used to
in the
play
old
the
times.
second edition of Dungeons and Dragons. What you have today is a mere nothing.
Yeah, it's like, back then it was more of a DM versus the players kind of thing. And these DMs, they kind of put their players into situations where it's really, really difficult. It's almost like the players are against a game designer of the DM, and it's like their job to beat the DM to sort of quote unquote win the game.
So a lot of times we find this. They're not necessarily the Warhammer kind of guys. To be honest with you, they can take that approach. However, it's more like think of it. If any of you have actually seen Journey Quest, to be honest, the first season portrays a wizard and a maze, and that's pretty much what we're talking about here. We're talking about a guy who basically sets up the whole thing that you have to beat itself. So it's a bunch of traps, a bunch of monsters, gangs, and whatnot.
Yeah, and you know what happens when you get stuck in a trap, stuck in something, might lead us on to the next one, which is the stick in the mud, actually. And these people, will absolutely adore one particular early version of D&D. Remind me which one that is, Don.
So hold on, the stick in the mug would probably love the first edition, so first, second, and third, or 3.5 even. Me personally, I was a big stick in the mud for a long time for fourth edition, and because people were stuck in the mud for 3.5, they hated fourth edition so much. So it was kind of a rivalry here for me, trying to convince people. It's like, listen, it's really good for people to introduce fourth edition, especially for new players. It makes things so much seamless to that of a, especially in the era of video games, it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
But no, we are proud.
Of course, the stick in the mud is going to be the guy who says that their version is the best, and everything that came after is going to be complete trash. Like Don, you mentioned fourth edition. I know that you had a little bit of a difficult time moving into the fifth edition rules, and then people in 3.5, as you said, would say that all fourth edition ruined D&D, and it's the same with every single one. Whatever edition these guys are stuck in, they're going to say that everything after that just ruined the game.
And the only problem with that is even sometimes they're so into it that they actually homebrew around it a lot, do their own versions of the story and the campaign around that edition because of the rules and the way the mechanics work. They're just stuck into it too much. And to be honest with you, the only reason why I was a stick in mud for the fourth edition because I could not find a way how to introduce certain homebrews and certain perks or even character driven situations. Like, for example, one of my characters would explode, this area of effect of fire the minute you named her as, as a racial slur. Um, I couldn't find anything in the fifth edition that could do that, so we had to kind of say, okay, listen, we're gonna have to amalgamate the two a bit.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that it's fun because it gets creative, and actually, this creativity brings us into the next section, the next title of type of dungeon master, which is the homebrewer.
Yep, and I love to do this a lot, but not to the extent that I've seen on the internet. Some people are just have no idea what they're creating out there sometimes.
Yeah, these, there's a lot of creativity that can be done with the game, and you can create monsters, magic items, you can create whole new races and classes, that goes on with that, and it goes on and on and on. But um uh, uh, no doubt the homebrewer DM is going to stick a couple of these, if not a lot of these, into their campaigns.
You're gonna break the game. Know the rules and how the mechanics work properly before you homebrew. How many times did I end up in a situation myself where I homebrewed something because I did not understand the mechanics of the thing? My players broke it. And I mean, you know, power levels were off. Having giving so, giving someone the deck of many things as their starting item was a bad idea.
Well, my friend, in my defense, if you give someone the deck of many things, and then you give someone like a free to use wish spell granted, let's say maybe, I don't know, by Merlin's magic wand, and wow, oh my goodness, the combinations that you can bring with that is just beautiful.
Do not underestimate the player's level of intelligence, even if his character sheet has a -1 on their modifier. It doesn't mean that the player has that in real life. They are capable of finding ways how to exploit this to their favor.
Definitely.
Metagaming,
Expect
in
your
other words.
players to completely outthink whatever anything you could come up with. Players are much smarter than a lot of DMs give credit for.
And we come to the final guy that we don't really want to mention because
That guy.
he's
He's
oh
that
he's
guy.
that guy. That that guy, that
That
dungeon
guy.
master, that
Yeah, we
he
almost really didn't want to mention this guy because whew,
let us help you out who that guy is. We've all met that guy. And sometimes we kind of face ourselves in the mirror and say sometimes we are that guy.
yeah, let's just imagine if you're in a group of friends, of the DM friends, and you don't really know who that guy might be, and nobody talks about it around you. Maybe think a little bit. It
He
might be you.
inserts the creepy fetishes of his darkest desires into the game. He's that guy. He's the guy who will everything bad you think of a dungeon master, um, is in that guy, forcing players to do things that they don't want to,
Yeah.
manipulating the situation, rules you all the way. And then the worst of the worst, the one that makes me want to put a finger down my throat and just puke out, is the fact that they use sexual connotations and all that jazz that they're into a game. Please stop. You're ruining the game for so many people, especially for the female audience, if I may say so.
Yeah, definitely. I think these kind of DMs give like a bad light to what D&D really is. Like it's a fun game for everyone, and we say everyone because everyone and anyone can play. But sometimes these DMs give it a sort of a creepy vibe, a sort of a bad taste, and a lot of sad to say, but a lot of female players do not join because they're scared that they might be in with a DM
Also,
like
by
this.
the way, that guy also fudges the dice. Okay, that guy will cheat and use his chair of power to his advantage. That guy will ruin RPGing for other players, which is not fair because RPGing is so much fun.
Oh yeah, you rolled a nat 20 and will be able to attack this guy? Last minute before you can't see AC is kind of just now 21, and nobody knew what it was before. Or if you're gonna roll against this guy, you get a 15 on your saving throw perhaps, and he says, "Oh no, I managed to get a 16," but in reality he rolled a 4 or like a 2 or a 1. But nobody can see that because it's behind the DM screen. That's not fair.
And then
That's
there's
not
the other
fair.
side of him. He's never prepared. He doesn't come with any form of story plot. He doesn't come up with any, I don't know, preparation whatsoever. This guy's gonna wing it all the way to the point where it's very obvious that if he's not good at storytelling or any of the good titles we mentioned, at the very least to salvage the situation, you know, this guy is going to be one of those like, what are we playing again? PCs looking at each other. It's like, can we end the session now? You know, can I just put the dagger right through my gut and slit open, and that's it? We're done. This guy doesn't even prepare snacks, for crying out loud. Don't be that guy.
Yeah, don't be that guy. If there's one thing you take away from this episode, is don't be that guy.
So this brings us, unfortunately, to a bit of a sour taste of the conclusions, ending it with that guy. As we said, we didn't really want to mention the type of dungeon master. So the only thing that we advise for you guys is whenever you're starting out as a DM, or even if you are an experienced dungeon master with several years under your belt, or perhaps you've been with the same players for a long time, don't be afraid to explore different styles of dungeon mastering. Maybe your group would actually enjoy it. Do your homework, do your research, come up with fun ideas how to make your players more involved, and always bring snacks to the table for everyone to enjoy and share.
Yeah, definitely. D&D is at the end of the day, it's a social gathering game. We're all gathering here together as a social group to play a game that we love, to play a game that we enjoy. And as long as everybody's having fun, that's, I think, the key takeaway for this. So if DMs out there, if you think that any part of the way you DM, or maybe you related yourself to one of these, maybe worse off styles that we discussed in our episode today, there's loads of fixes you can do. Ask your players, ask them, how are they having fun, what can I do to make it more fun, and that should make the game the best game improvements you
And
can do.
exactly, I mean, feedback is always key. Thanks again, everyone, for listening to our episode. It was so much fun doing this episode, to be honest, taking a break from digital versus physical for once. Um,
Yeah, definitely. We love anything role playing. I know me and Don, we just love playing D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. So this is really an episode that we looked forward to talking about, especially a little shameless plug here once again about our the D&D campaign, the PlayUp League that's happening right now.
Yes, officially known as PlayUp Legends at this point, and we do have our merch with there's a mug with the logo and a T-shirt with the logo on our Shopify account, which is playupmota.myshopify.com, and over there you can actually purchase products, and this way you'll indirectly be helping us while also having something special to heart because you like what we do. Also, you can support us directly through our Patreon, which is patreon.com/playupmt, where you can support us for as little as €3 per month to help us create these content and expand more on what we can bring forward for you guys.
And once again, we'd like to say thank you to our sponsors, warmongergamesmalta.com and the Miniature Corner Studio.
Thank you everyone for listening, and until next week.
Keep safe, everybody. Thanks for listening.